Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alexey, and today I have a special guest, Tony Lindgren. Tony is a master engineer at Fascination Street Studios, created by Jens Bogren. Tony has been working with such great musicians and bands as Paradise Lost, Dimmu Borgir, Opeth, Powerwolf, Billie Eilish, and many more. It's a huge honor to have you on my YouTube channel today, Tony. And let's start our interview. And my first question is how you became a master engineer.
How I became a mastering engineer. It was basically when Jens asked me to do a trial for him to see, because he needed a mastering engineer basically, and so I did a trial for him, and I really fell in love with the kind of work that mastering is. So not only because of, Jens giving me a chance, but just that whole, working with a lot of different things, or a lot of different projects constantly really spoke to me. So how I became a mastering engineer is basically because Jens needed a mastering engineer, and I, at the time I was studying under him. So I dove straight into it, and that's how I became an engineer.
How you got into mastering metal? So before Jens Bogren, how you got into mastering metal music in general?
I would say that when it comes to mastering metal, I've always been a metal guy, especially before I worked with Jens, I didn't really listen to much else than metal, So that's kind of how it is. I was a metal guy straight up. So that was the music that I like to work with.
My next question is how you got a job in Fascination Street Studios.
Yeah, so I was taking a class called music production here in my hometown, Örebro. And Jens was a teacher there for the kind of recording and mixing part of things. And that's how I met him. And once I was done with this class, after 1.5 years, he reached out to me and asked me if I was interested to work with him, because at the time he was all by himself, and he felt like he had too many projects coming in and couldn't handle everything by himself. And especially at the time, there was a lot more mastering things coming in. So so he reached out, and like I said, I did some working trials for him, and I got it.
Is it possible to learn to master on a good level by using plugins only?
I would say so, for sure. There's a lot of people out there that only uses plugins. There's when it comes to loudness and things like that, I mean, you can still push. I'm sure you've heard a lot of mixes that have been pushed really hard with the Pro L2 and stuff like that. You can definitely reach a really good level nowadays, especially when we have better clipping plugins coming out right now as well, for example Flatline. So I would say you could definitely reach a really good level, but it's when it comes to the analog domain, so to speak, when it comes to the loudness, I just feel it's a cleaner loudness. It just has that those final percent that I really like. But it's definitely possible to reach a very good level just with plugins, for sure.
So in this case, what is the difference between analog and digital mastering?
The difference, I wouldn't say the difference as the thought process isn't different. It's just a lot of the straight up mastering gear, analog gear. I would say it just has that those few percent extra that's really nice to the ear, especially when it comes to AD clipping and stuff like that, and of course a few analog EQs and compressors. If you ask me what I like the most when it comes to analog stuff, it's definitely compression. I never get the same kind of feel from plug-in compression as I do with analog stuff. And like I said, also when it comes to clipping, I still feel the analog clipping, if you have the right gear, is still has like the edge over plugins still.
What hardware should you use for mastering?
When it comes to speakers, for sure, like really good speakers. I understand that that's not like the answer people want, but that is when it comes to hardware and mastering, I would say like speakers and a really good room is like something that you can't like avoid if you're gonna work as a professional mastering engineer, and if you're gonna like hear everything in a very honest way, so to speak. When it comes to the gear you put on the actual master, I mean that I would say that's very much like a personal thing. Like I said, I prefer compression analog. I do all my, for example, I do all my EQing. I do in the box, but I still prefer analog compression over the digital stuff. And especially when you're working in metal and you want to do that like clipping thing, you definitely want like a really clean, really good sounding AD converter.
So in this case, what plugins do you usually use for mastering?
For plugins, I use for the EQ part of things, I tend to really love the ePure 3 from Flux. It's a really like nice sounding EQ that's, I mean, it's super like transparent. It's not like supposed to be like, some kind of simulation of analog gear. It's just like a very clean EQ that I just feel, I've been using it since I started. So I just feel that I can do the right like moves and get things to sound right. I do use the Pro Q3 as well. A little bit, not much, but every now and then. And then I tend to kind of try out different limiters as well. Like I always have like a final limiter after like my analog chain, and for that I use either like the Ozone 10 or the Pro L2, and depending on the material, like I just have to try it out and see what works best for the material. But other than that, it's there's some like multiband compression and stuff like that I feel is just so nice to have, and it's easy to use in the box. And also when it comes to like, I know not all mastering engineers work like this, but I tend to do like automations if it's needed. Like both volume automations, but also maybe EQ automations if I feel like, there's like a spike there in like during 10 seconds of this song. And working with digital stuff in that case as well is so easy because it's so recallable, so to speak, if you have to open up the session again.
How usually your clients prepare their mixes for mastering if they want to work with you?
It's definitely a case by case, of course. Normally people send the mixes that they've approved, but like without clipping or limiting. That's like the standard thing, because a lot of, especially within metal, most mixing engineer, I would say, are using they're using some kind of limiter or clipping to kind of boost the mix to a listenable level, so to speak, for the client to approve. But they of course remove that before they send it to mastering. That's like the standard. I would say that a lot of people, or some engineers that might not be as like used to sending stuff for mastering, tend to remove everything from their mix bus, like EQing, compression, everything, because they feel or think that that's a part of mastering. Well, I feel if you've mixed into a compressor and if you're mixed into EQing, whatever, that should stay on, because that's still a part of the sound. It's still a part of the mix. So every now and then I can like definitely hear like, oh yeah, something is missing here that I'm pretty sure that the client had on when they were listening to the mix, when they were approving it. So every now and then I get those kinds of files as well, and I can always like work with my gear as well. But the best thing for me at least, is when the mix is as close to what the band approved, so to speak, but without limiting.
So in this case, I want to ask some extra question, like, do you care about mixes in general? So for instance, right now I'm learning how to mix metal in Nail the Mix. And honestly saying, my mixes are not so good in comparison to professional mixes because I just started mixing metal and learning how to mix metal just 1 year ago. And I'm sending to you one of my mixes, not from the Mix, because they are copyrighted, but any metal mix I'm mixing for a client or for myself right now. And if I have some major mixing mistakes, like maybe I don't have a good low end, maybe my guitars are muddy, maybe I have thin vocals, but due to my knowledge right now, which I have right now, I like my mix. I think that my mix sounds perfect, but on your professional level, you think that you can hear that I don't have a good low and I have muddy guitars, maybe I have a balance issues, and even if I'm willing to pay you money for mastering, will you be taking this job? Will you be mastering my mix, or will you be telling me that, you know, Alex, your mix is not good enough. Maybe you should go and learn something about mixing. And even my professional mastering won't help your mix sound good after all. So how do you work with such clients, if you have such clients, of course, in this case?
I definitely do. It's I mean, like, I work with everything, like everything from professional to at-home mixers. So it's not like I've never like turned anyone down. I always, if there's like a glaring problem that really needs fixing, I will always like say, like, guys, if let's say the S's are like insanely loud in the vocals, for example, I would, you know, because that like the mix needs like top end, but it's only gonna push out those S's even more and be annoying. I would definitely address it and say, like, guys, we should check this out in the mix, because it's gonna make the end result even better. There's also been cases where I've been where I felt like, yeah, it's even if I give them feedback, I feel like it's not gonna, like, because mixing is difficult. So it's just like, even if I give you feedback, maybe this is not gonna resolve itself. In those cases, I might like give the client feedback, but also like suggest, like, we could try stem mastering. Like I might be able to address this in a stem mastering session, for example. But I wouldn't turn anyone down just because they don't have like the experience that a professional has. Like, there's a huge percent every year is just like people working at home that I get. So it's you always have to just, like, you know, kind of identify what the problem is and then just help the client out the best you can.
Since you are mastering metal music mostly, how you got a gig of mastering for Billie Eilish?
Yeah. So it all started back in 2015, I think. We had a good friend that worked for Live Nation, and he was at the time he was kind of, I don't know if he was in charge, but he was like involved with the recording and mixing of the iTunes Festival in London, and that festival was going on for like a month, I think. So they had like huge artists playing every night. I think it was like 2 or 3 artists, something like that, every night. And so Apple wanted, because iTunes, or sorry, Master for iTunes was pretty new at the time, and Apple wanted like everything from the iTunes Festival to be, or like an EP from each gig. They wanted mastered for iTunes and put up on the platform as fast as possible after the show ended. So our friend contacted us and just explained it, and we got like through that we got iTunes certified, or Master for iTunes certified, and we started doing these like 3 to 10 songs, depending on what the band and the management wanted, from each show. So we basically worked like, me and Jens master stuff like basically 24 hours per day. Like, we got like projects and just mastered them as quickly as possible and sent them out. And at the time, Billie just came out with, she just kind of blew up with Ocean Eyes, I think. So she was playing at that festival. So that was the first time I got to work with her. But I didn't know who it was at the time because I barely ever listened to radio. But then, so throughout the years, we've always like gotten these kinds of work where there's a live gig that needs to get up on Apple Music. So we've established that kind of contact where we get those shows and we master them and they go up on Apple Music. So the latest one for me was when she was doing, I think she was like Artist of the Year or something on Apple Music, and she was playing the Steve Jobs Theater. And so I mastered like, I think it was 16 songs or something from that as well. But yeah, it's kind of a winding road, the whole story, but it's just like the guy that we know, he really loves what we do, and he like likes our approach to mastering, and he just felt like these guys are going to be able to do it, and yeah, it's been going on like that. We've done a lot of like, big like live shows. Jens did one for Taylor Swift back in a few years ago, and I've done everything from Billie Eilish to Snoop Dogg to a lot of different kind of big American artists, which is really cool. But yeah.
So in this case, how mastering metal is different from mastering a pop song?
The approach in itself, I wouldn't say is different per se. I would say when it comes to, like, for example, when it comes to loudness, I would say that metal sounds usually pretty good when you use clipping for the major part of the loudness stage, so to speak, while pop and more clean stuff not always sound as good. So you might like want to work like balance, your amount of clipping and limiting a little bit more. In that case, like more limiting for pop, let's say. But it all depends on the product, of course. Like you always have to kind of find that sweet spot. But other than that, it's just like, it's usually about frequencies. It's usually about like, adding some kind of energy or something like that. And also having like, I always have like references within the same genre. So I kind of get like, I get the vibe of what like hip hop would sound like and what pop or, whatever kind of pop it is would sound like. And then I kind of just like tweak from there. I'm never trying to like match the reference exactly, of course, but just like to get like a kind of a view of how like most, let's say, hip hop record, what they would do with like the the very low end and the top end and stuff like that. So you get like a fair comparison to what's out on the market already.
If we talk about treating your room acoustically, what is the difference about treating your mixing and mastering rooms acoustically?
So I'm not an acoustical engineer, but what I would say is that I mean, as like for both stages, it's good to have like a really well prepared room acoustically. I would say it's even more important for mastering because you need that, like you want the sound to be as honest as possible in every step of the way. It's not bad for the sound to be honest when you're mixing, but I would think that mixing guys probably want to push more money into like gear and whatever compared to a mastering engineer that's like more limited when it comes to gear, but like your listening environment is really important. So if we have to like, put them on a scale, I would say that mastering should have the cleanest room or the most like well acoustically prepared room. But, it's of course good for both rooms to be as well prepared acoustically as possible, of course.
My next question is, what studio monitors should you buy for mastering?
That's a difficult question, of course, because it's not only is it a personal preference, of course, but it's just like, I mean, I haven't tried all them out, so to speak. Like, I know ATCs and PMCs, of course, are very popular and very good. I'm running in an Amphion setup, and they sound really good as well. I've worked with the Barefoots as well. But if we just like, instead of talking about like brands per se, I would just say like you need like a monitor that is as true and honest as possible, so to speak. Yeah, that's probably the best answer I can give you.
What is the main goal of mastering for you?
The main goal, I mean, it is, of course, to make the music come alive, so to speak. Yeah, like it's very important to like, if you listen to a heavy song, it should feel heavy and cool. You know, it shouldn't sound boring and just like to like I don't know the word, but like too loose in how it sounds. Like you want it to sound cool or big or whatever. It's to for me, the goal is always to, first of all, be as true to the mix I feel that I should and can be, and also to just bring out the best of the music. And like I said, it varies from situation to situation. You know, like some mixes are going to sound really bad, and then you have to do more like weightlifting, so to speak, when it comes to the mastering part, to really bring everything out and make it sound like, you know, bright, big, and cool. But in some cases, it might just be like basically just push the volume a little bit, and then you're all good. So the main goal is always to make sure that the music sound as good as possible and like musically interesting.
My next question is, in which cases mastering can fix a mix?
It all depends, of course. Like you can do, like I said, you can do a lot when you're mastering. You can start doing like MS stuff and like really like start messing up the mix. In some cases, it might help. It might help to like, you know, cut like 2 dBs of whatever thing in the mid signal to, you know, remove some kind of issue that the monitoring side of the mixing side had. It's hard to say. I would say like this: it's easier to mess things up in the mastering than to like fix a mix. If the mix has glaring problems, I would always talk to the mixing engineer first. But there's definitely things you can do. Like it's like EQing is a powerful tool, man. It's just you can do a lot with an EQ. But the question is, can you fix a mix? Like if you have a bad snare drum, like it's not like I'm gonna fix the snare drum, but it might sound better in the context of the song after I work on it. But it's not gonna sound like a new snare drum, so to speak. So if the mix is really bad, it's better to just straight up talk to the client, I would say.
Where people can learn how to master the music in these days?
I think you can learn a lot at home. Like you can learn the process at home, like the thought process. Of course, it's better to, you know, sit in with a real engineer to see how they think and react to something. I mean, the URM platform is, of course, great as well. You see a lot of professionals working on stuff and see how they, you know, how they treat music overall and what kind of tools they would use. But I'm sure you've seen yourself, like a lot of the professionals are using the same tools that, you know, most people already have nowadays at home. So the part of like learning mastering, you know, as like the most basic part of mastering, I would say is kind of easy because you're just trying to like treat a stereo file in a way that it sounds more interesting and, you know, well balanced and good for the overall listener. Then there's of course the part of, you know, the gear part of things and, you know, the rooms and whatever. But the overall thought process, I think you can learn on your own and watching, professionals on YouTube or URM or whatever, but I also think it's very important to be really like interested in music, if you see what I'm saying. Like, it's like you need to like music. Like, I know a lot of people getting into mixing, for example, they're like, oh, I love mixing snare drums, like it's the most fun. And I get that for sure. But like, if you're not like, if your passion is not like the whole music thing, like the whole song, I think it's difficult to be a mastering engineer, because you can't like focus in too much on details. So like liking music and listening to a lot of music, whatever genre, I think is really important as well. But the technical side of things and like the workflow, I think you can learn that pretty much by, reading and watching, tutorials or stuff on YouTube and URM, where you can like really like see how the professionals work, because the workflow in itself is not that advanced, so to speak.
And my final question is, what is your opinion on AI mastering and online mastering services in competition with real mastering engineers, if you can say so?
Yeah. It's a good question. It's of course, like at this very moment, I wouldn't say that I feel very threatened by AI, but I mean, I also know that AI is just like, it's ramping up really quickly how good it is. I've heard some like stuff from like Lander that sounded really good. Like it didn't sound destroyed or overly processed. It sounded pretty good on that song that I heard. But I think what I feel, at least when I talk to my clients, is that a lot of people still want that, the human factor, so to speak, like the being able to talk to an engineer and like ask them, what can I do with this? And, because when you send stuff to an AI mastering platform, what you get back, like me as a mastering engineer, I also work as kind of a, kind of a control for if the music sounds good overall, so if I master something and I send it back to the client, they usually kind of feel like this is something that sounds good, if you get what I'm saying. If they just send it to an AI and get it back, it's not going to be the same interaction. They're not going to have someone, giving the okay for how it sounds. It's just going to be like a process that happens, and then you just have to figure out themselves if it sounds good or not. It sounds strange, but it's just like, I mean, I work on hundreds of projects per year, so people know that I listen to a lot of music, and if I do something and then I send it back, they're going to know that, okay, this is at least, within some kind of range of quite good, or as good at this material is gonna get, basically. And then we can always do revisions, of course, and, tweaks and stuff. But I think it's the human element of getting a final okay on your material, I think, is something that is still wanted by people working in the industry. But that said, you never know. Like if AI still, if it like continues to grow as it does and so quickly as it does, who knows? We never know. We might be AI mastering all over soon. I don't know. We'll see.
Thank you so much, Tony, for such a wonderful conversation. It was a huge honor talking to you. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. It was a pleasure.